Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami Arc, Episode 11, The Legendary Quincy. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of exactly what happened within this episode. So we start the episode with some lighthearted time of Rukia and Ichigo spending time with their friends, specifically being scolded alongside their friends for the fact that in the previous episode, Ichigo was caught by security interfering with Don Kananoji's show, and Rukia was also seen, running after him and getting caught. And because it was known that the others were there and friends with Rukia and Ichigo, they also got called in. Luckily, thanks to some tricks, they managed to escape their scolding. And then Ichigo and Rukia get a couple of notifications that there have been some hollows, but by the time they reached the area that was indicated on Rukia's cell phone, they realize that the hollow's already gone, and were teased with kind of a shadowy figure watching them. And then, while they're talking about exam results, Uryu Ishida is brought up as the top scorer in their class, who is also in a handicrafts club with Orihime, who then basically reveals himself as a Quincy and defeats a hollow in front of Rukia and Ichigo before telling Ichigo that he hates him. This, of course, puts Ichigo off because he hasn't done anything to him, and so he then starts to stalk him around the school. And then, as he is following him home, Ishida basically turns around and basically tells him that he's not very good at dealing with his spiritual energy and he's not very good at being a Shinigami, doesn't know the basics, and challenges him to a duel. Meanwhile, while Ichigo is being challenged to this duel, Rukia has gone to Urahara's shop, where Urahara is letting her know the history of the Quincy tribe. And now that we've been reminded and rewatched the episode, I will rank the episode on our two ranking lists. As a reminder, the first list is our mostly objective ranking list, and then the second ranking is the personal ranking. So starting with our mostly objective rank values, there's only two that I felt applied to this episode, and I've highlighted them below. The first one, of course, is that we have a multi-arc main character introduction in Uryu Ishida. And then we also get some world building aspects because we are now being introduced to a whole new tribe of people that were thought to have gone extinct. So basically, before the history comes into play, we get a look at Ishida's powers, how he has like a little charm bracelet that becomes a bow and arrow, and that's using his spiritual energy, and that he is able to then shoot this spiritual arrow at a hollow and destroy it. He also is able to, because he has such good control over his strong spiritual energy, he is able to manifest soul ribbons. And this is where we learn that Shinigami actually have soul ribbons that are red, whereas ordinary people or those who are fully human have white ribbons. And that is how Ishida was able to find out that Ichigo is a Shinigami and that he became a Shinigami sometime in May. And then we, of course, at the end of the second half of the episode, have Rukia going to Urahara's shop, where he tells her about the history of the Quincy, and we learn that the Quincy were a tribe of humans, that they had very strong spiritual energy and were therefore able to sense hollows, but not only that, attract hollows. And over time, they learned to train their spiritual powers in order to be able to hunt the hollows, making them similar to Shinigami in that sense. However, unlike Shinigami, who, when they defeat a hollow, purify the soul and allow it to move on to Soul Society, The Quincy, out of a desire of vengeance for their fallen comrades, instead wanted to fully eradicate and kill the Hollows. And because of that, they then were um, eliminated and believed to have gone extinct 200 years previous to the present in the series. And that is where we got to at the end of this episode. I'm sure that we will learn more going forward, but that was a brief history of what the Quincy were and also why they were not accepted as, partners to Shinigami, but why they also had to be eliminated. And both of those points were worth 4 points each, which brings this episode on a mostly objective ranking to 8 out of 10. Now, as a reminder of our mostly objective rankings so far for this arc, we have in first place The Day I Became a Shinigami, The Shinigami's Work, The Older Brother's Wish, The Younger Sister's Wish, Fight to the Death, Ichigo vs. Ichigo, June 17th, Memories in the Rain, Unbeatable Enemy, Greetings from a Stuffed Lion. In 8th place is this episode, The Legendary Quincy, Beat the Invisible Enemy, Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip, and then in 11th, Cursed Parakeet. And that brings us to the personal ranking, where it is entirely my opinion that determines the score. So, firstly, a couple of call-out scenes that I felt were in there was I found it very amusing that Rukia, when she's with like the other students, puts on this really somewhat funny persona. She talks in a higher pitched voice, she acts cute. And so when they are being scolded, Tatsuki takes Inoue away because they basically said, oh, we were just there by coincidence. We weren't any part of this. We're not going to sit here and be scolded. They left. Then Rukia started fake crying, and of course the gym teacher is like all like, oh my gosh, let me comfort this frail little girl who's crying. And of course, Ichigo, Sato, and then all of their friends sneak out the window and basically run away. And while the gym teacher is distracted with wanting to run after them, Rukia takes the opportunity to then leave. And then, luckily for them, the principal, who is also there, basically tells the gym teacher that he doesn't need to scold them anymore for being on TV. And so they are allowed to make it free. We then, like I said, mentioned Rukia and Ichigo. They're basically chasing after Hollows, but by the time they get there, Hollows are gone. And every time that they kind of go to one of these scenes, we see a shadowy figure looking at them, watching them, giving off really stalker type vibes. But then Ichigo performs a Kanso on a ghost that was saved from a hollow, and then when they got the next call, Ishida basically at this point reveals himself. And he comes out and he puts out his arm, and we dramatically see that there is a charm hanging off of it that looks like it's in the shape of a cross. And he holds his arm out for like quite a bit of time before then the charm kind of moves into the palm of his hand and he basically makes a bow, and then he's able out of spirit energy, and then he is able to pull back on that bow and make an arrow out of soul energy and then kill the hollow that they were there to hunt. He then kind of disparages Ichigo for being pretending to be a Shinigami without knowing the basics, reveals that he is one of the Quincy and that he hates Ichigo on principle, which, as I mentioned in the summary, Ichigo didn't really like. And Inoue happens to overhear him kind of grumbling about this interaction, and she inquires about like him being interested in Ishida and points out that she knows him from their handicrafts club. And they go and they decide to stalk him to his club. And on this channel, I do multiple different rewatches of different shows. And one of the shows that I rewatch is Death Note. And I have made points on several occasions about how hilarious I find the dramatic writing scenes in those. And Bleach didn't disappoint either because they gave us a very, very amusing dramatic sewing scene where he takes a stuffed animal, he throws it up in the air, he opens up his box of threads and needles, threads the needle by throwing the thread through the needle as it like kind of flows behind, and then he catches the stuffed animal and quickly sews it up and then tosses it in the air again so that it can be caught by its owner. I thought that was a great scene. So that was very amusing to me. And then, of course, we just basically, for the next bit, Ichigo then follows Ishida home from that club, where he is then challenged to the duel, which has not begun in this episode, but is going to be in the next one. And then we also get Ishida's, no, Urahara's basic history of the Quincy explained to us. And on the one hand, you could say that it is a bit of a setup episode because it's setting up for the duel, setting up for more information on Ishida. However, the reason I didn't count that on our mostly objective ranking list, and it doesn't really impact even my personal score, is simply because I consider this episode more Ishida's introduction episode, not necessarily fully a setup episode, though at the end we do get a setup cliffhanger with the duel. Anyways, I felt like it was a very amusing episode. It was kind of a fun episode. It was a good way to introduce Ishida to the audience and give even more depth and history of the world that is being created by the author. Overall, I decided to give this episode a rank of 7 out of 10. And that then brings our personal ranking in the arc so far to, in first place, Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip. The older sister's wish, the younger sister's wish, or sorry, the older brother's wish and the younger sister's wish. Beat the Invisible Enemy. This episode is in fourth. The Legendary Quincy. Then the Shinigami's Work. Cursed Parakeet. Unbeatable Enemy. June 17th. Memories in the Rain. The Day I Became a Shinigami. Greetings from a Stuffed Lion. And then in 11th is Fight to the Death. Ichigo versus Ichigo. And that brings us to our final segment, which is our series ranking so far, which is of course where we are going to be comparing each of the arcs against each other. And in the Agent of the Shinigami arc so far, with the addition of 8 for the mostly objective ranking, we are now at 96 out of 200. And then on the personal ranking side, we are adding 7 and are now at 70 out of 200. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami Arc, Episode 11, The Legendary Quincy. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.